Excellent. Good morning, Your Honor. On behalf of the plaintiff, Jordan Street, my name is Austin Wallach. I'm joined today by my co-chair, Ms. Zua Zhao. After opposing counsel has an opportunity to introduce themselves today, I do have a few housekeeping matters that I'd like to go over with the court to understand your preferences. And then I do have one substantive motion that we'd like to bring to your attention today.
Okay. Defense counsel, if you want to introduce yourself. Defense counsel, do you want to make appearances? Imokai, are you able to hear me? I think you're muted right now.
Yes, I am now. I'm sorry. I was
Okay.
having a few internet connections. I couldn't quite hear what was going on. I was breaking up. My apologies.
No problem. So if you just want to make appearances right now.
Do you mind if I just close my Zoom and I'll be right back just to kind of clear those internet problems I'm having? 1 second.
Go ahead.
I hope that should clear everything up.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, good morning, Your Honor. My name is Imokai Okolo, and today I have the honor and privilege of representing Coach Reese Taylor from Waco High School.
Okay. And plaintiff, if you want to go ahead with your pretrial matters and housekeeping.
Yes, Your Honor. Starting with housekeeping first. Now, given the somewhat unusual nature of today's proceedings, would you prefer that, given we're not in court, we sit or stand during the examinations and statements today, or may we just move at our discretion?
It's entirely up to you as long as you're cognizant of staying within the frame and everyone can see you.
Yes, Your Honor. Second, there are a series of exhibits in this case marked 1 through 22. Now, I've spoken with opposing counsel before trial today, and if it's amenable to the court, we would like those to retain their markings throughout trial.
Yeah, that's fine.
To that end, Your Honor, there are also certain exhibits in this case, exhibits 16 through 19, as well as exhibit 21, that have been pre-admitted by a pretrial order. I just wanted to put the court on notice of that fact today.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, as we enter exhibits or discuss some of the pre-admitted exhibits, may we publish them freely on the screen so that the parties, Your Honor, and the witness may see them?
Yes, and you don't have to ask for permission to do that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Finally, I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation for my opening statement today. It does use 2 exhibits that have not yet been admitted. I did show this PowerPoint to opposing counsel, and as I understand it, he has no objections to those exhibits being shown in that opening statement. For reference, those will be exhibits 2 and exhibits 3, which are a picture of the soccer field that is highlighted, as well as a picture of the decedent, Miss Rory Street. I just wanted to let the court know and ask the court's permission to publish that PowerPoint during my opening statement.
Okay, and defense counsel, is there any objection?
We have no objections, Your Honor. We've seen and reviewed the PowerPoint.
Okay, that's fine.
That's all that we have for housekeeping matters. I can move into substantive matters at this time if you'd like, Your Honor.
Okay, please do.
Now, by way of background, this is a case in which the plaintiff, Jordan Street, has brought a wrongful death action against the defendant, Coach Reese Taylor, for causing the death of her daughter. Coach Taylor was the soccer coach for Miss Street's daughter, Rory. And on September 7th of 2018, during 105-degree heat, when she was forced to do some extensive activity, Miss Street, Rory that is, she fell to the ground and suffered from heat stroke before then dying on that soccer field. We only have one motion today, and that actually pertains to prior drug use that may be mentioned by opposing counsel in either testimony or evidence. We're moving to exclude that today. Both parties have already agreed through their expert and through stipulation that on the day in question, Miss Street did have 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine in her system after her death. However, any deposition testimony or evidence admitted today that shows she had engaged in prior drug use at any point, that would only prejudice the jury. And moreover, Your Honor, it's a violation of 404B, the rule against bad character evidence. As such, we request that Your Honor not admit that testimony today.
A response?
Your Honor, we will not be diving into specific instances of conduct pursuant to Rule 404B. That pertains to specific instances of conduct. While we will be talking about drug use today, as that's an important factor in today's case, you're going to hear expert testimony, if I may proffer, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Testimony pertaining to that cocaine usage leading to the heat stroke exhaustion and the cardiac arrest that was suffered on September 7th of 2018. So it's important for Your Honor to understand the history of Rory and the history of Rory's drug abuse. While we won't be going into specific instances of conduct, the fact that drugs were used from Rory are going to be mentioned.
Your Honor, if I may respond briefly.
So just in the instances of time, so the specific instances of conduct, we'll go ahead and exclude that.
Yes, Your Honor.
As to some of the other allusions to drug use, I'm not going to exclude that right now. However, feel free to bring that up in the context of how defense counsel brings it up, should that happen.
Certainly, Your Honor. Just to be clear for the court, we have no objection to the expert testimony about the effects of cocaine. It's just that prior instances of conduct that we had an issue with. So I think we're all taken care of.
Perfect.
With that, we're ready to proceed.
Okay.
There's a few housekeeping matters from the defense, Your Honor. We just wanted to make the court aware that some of those pre-admitted documents that opposing counsel referenced in their housekeeping are actually expert testimony from witnesses that we've called prior to today's trial, Your Honor. And so just so you know, that's some of the testimony that may be read onto the record at any point throughout the course of today's trial.
Okay.
Secondly, Your Honor, throughout the course of today's trial, we may be seeing some sort of impeachment. And normally when we would be in court, in Your Honor's court, Your Honor may not necessarily see the document that's being impeached with as the impeachment's going on. But for today's purposes on this Zoom call for clarity, is it okay that impeachments proceed by way of screen share so everyone is on the same page of what's going on?
That's fine with me.
And Your Honor, we don't have any more housekeeping matters, but I do have some substantive motions to eliminate if you're ready to hear those at this time.
Go ahead.
First, Your Honor, we believed, I've spoken with opposing counsel before today's trial, and opposing counsel has mentioned that they will not be going into any subsequent remedial measures pursuant to Rule 407, Your Honor. And I just want you to know that we've agreed on that, and that subsequent remedial measures, specifically the fact that a tent and Gatorade was put up after this incident, will not be mentioned throughout the course of today's trial.
Okay.
And secondly, Your Honor, we believe that opposing counsel, we have a good faith basis to believe opposing counsel may bring up some prior instances of conduct on behalf of Coach Taylor. To give Your Honor some context, Coach Taylor has been working at Waco High School for the past 6 years. Before working for Waco High School, Coach Taylor worked for university here in Waco. And while working at university, there was an incident where Coach Taylor had gotten to some sort of physical altercation with a student, but we'd ask that be excluded pursuant to Rule 404B, and that's a specific instance of conduct only being used to show action and conformity therewith, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, we have no objection to that. We have no intention to dive into that testimony today. It would only be brought up by the plaintiff if, for example, on cross-examination, the defendant opened the door by saying he had never had issues with students before. But barring that, we have no intention to discuss that today.
Okay, then that will be excluded, barring the defense opening the door.
And Your Honor, with that, the defense is ready to proceed to opening statements.
Okay, perfect. Whenever you're ready.
Excellent. Your Honor, may I take just a moment to prepare?
Go ahead.
Thank you. And now, may I proceed?
Yes.
Winning cannot come at all costs. September 7th, 2018, it started like any other day for Jordan Street. She gets up, she throws on a pot of coffee, and she starts getting ready for a day at work. She wakes up her only daughter, Rory, who is the light of her life. Rory, she's just a teenager. She just started her senior year at Waco High School, and she's incredible. She's a superstar athlete, and she's already received multiple Division I scholarship offers. She shares a love and a dedication for soccer, just like her mom. So Jordan gets Rory in the car and drives her to school, drops her off right outside. But as she waves goodbye to her daughter, what she doesn't know and what she can't possibly know is that she's doing it for the last time. Jordan Street will never see her daughter alive again. Later that afternoon, as she's getting ready to come home, she receives news that no parent should ever have to receive. She learns that Rory, her daughter, the most important thing in her world, died during a soccer practice. After the defendant, Coach Reese Taylor, punished her on that soccer field, pushing her to the brink, causing her to die. All because the defendant wanted to win more than anything else. But winning cannot come at all costs. That's why Rory Street's mother, the plaintiff in this case, filed this wrongful death suit against the defendant for causing the death of her daughter. Now, we'll show you today by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant's actions in this case, that his choice to punish Miss Street that day, that's what caused her to die far too young. And that will become clear today through three main points that I'll return to throughout trial. First, that Miss Street trusted Coach Taylor as her coach. Second, that the defendant broke the rules and he broke that trust. And third, that the defendant's actions cost Miss Street her life. Now, Your Honor, I'd like to take those each in turn briefly, starting with that first point, that Miss Street trusted her coach. Now, the defendant, you'll learn today, isn't new to coaching. In fact, he's coached for decades. Your Honor will learn today that he went to college specifically to get a degree in physical education because he wanted to be a coach. In addition to getting that degree, that specialized study, he's also coached soccer for more than 20 seasons and has been the varsity coach at Waco High School for 7 years. What's more, he receives trainings on the best practices, techniques, and drills for making his players better. Now, today, we'll show you one of those trainings that he received, and we'll talk about what some of those best practices are. The evidence will show that the defendant knew on particularly hot days, he was supposed to give his players breaks, supposed to make sure they had access to shade, and that he understood the dangers of practicing in extreme heat conditions. He was supposed to protect those players. But on September 7th, 2018, he didn't. And that brings us to our second point today, that the defendant broke those rules and as a result, broke that trust. As Your Honor will learn today, September 7th, the day in question, it was one of those particularly hot days. You'll be able to see a weather report for Waco that showed exactly how hot it was. Starting at 3:15 in the afternoon when practice began, the temperature was at over 100 degrees. And throughout the day, that just went up. In fact, at the end of that soccer practice, the peak temperature hit 105. Now, we know that that's not unusual for Waco in the summer, but anyone who's been out in that heat can tell you that the last thing you should be doing is exerting yourself to the brink. That in and of itself can be dangerous. And despite knowing the risk posed to his players by the extreme temperature, the defendant pushed Miss Street and her teammates harder and harder and harder. The evidence will show he didn't give them water breaks that often. He didn't let them stop the exercises they were doing. He didn't provide a shady area for them to sit under. And he didn't reschedule practice for later in the day when it would be safer for all of them. No, because the defendant wanted to win at all costs. You're going to hear about what he did to Miss Street that day, that he made her sprint on a side field doing a drill that's called Burma Road. Now, that's an intense drill that requires sprinting and dribbling a ball for a total of 60 yards, and then bear crawling on hands and feet all the way back to the start before getting up and doing it again. The evidence will show that Miss Street had to do this on a day with extreme heat, with no breaks, no water, and no shade. The coach won't even be able to tell you how many times he made her run that drill that day. But even that intense drill, it wasn't enough for the defendant. You'll learn that when he felt Miss Street still wasn't living up to his lofty expectations, the evidence will show his immediate action was to call Miss Street over and punish her further. He created a brand new drill that he had never used before. He had all of his players line up and had Miss Street stand 10 yards away from them with a soccer ball. Then, as she dribbled that ball, he instructed each of those players one at a time to run, slide across the ground, and steal the ball by taking her legs out from under her, sending her tumbling to the earth again and again and again until she wasn't able to get back up. Now, that brings us to that third and final point, that it was the defendant's actions that cost Miss Street her life. By the time the defendant was making her do that slide tackle drill, Miss Street was already noticeably pale, looking nearly lifeless, was struggling to breathe, was hunching over with her hands on her hips as she groaned in pain. And still, the coach made her continue. Until after being tackled to the ground for the 15th time in a row, Miss Street started to suffer from heat stroke and went into cardiac arrest. That teenage girl died on that hot, dry field before an ambulance could even get to her. All because the defendant wanted to win at all costs. Now, the defense today, they may try to shift your focus. They may try to blame Miss Street, a teenager, for her own death. But, Your Honor, when you keep in mind those 3 points, you'll know that it's the defendant who's responsible, not Miss Street. Rory won't get a chance to graduate high school. She'll never be a professional athlete. And that's because on September 7th of 2018, she paid the ultimate price for the defendant's desire to win at all costs. Now, your verdict today, it will never be able to replace her. Nothing can undo that loss. But what your verdict can do is tell the defendant that he can't push a young girl to death's door just for the sake of having a winning soccer team. Because when winning at all costs means losing the life of a teenage girl, then that price is far, far too high. Find the defendant liable.
Opening statements, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
May it please the court and opposing counsel. Rory Street died suddenly and without warning because she used cocaine before practice on September 7th, 2018. This powerful and illegal drug made it impossible for Rory's body to cool down and turned what would have been a routine soccer practice into a sudden and fatal tragedy. You know what's heartbreaking most about this entire case is that no one knew what Rory had done until it was too late. Good morning. Once again, my name is Imokai Okolo, and I have the privilege and honor of representing Coach Reese Taylor. Hey, Reese, why don't you go ahead and turn your camera on and wave hi to folks so they know who you are. Now, before we actually start to talk about what happened in today's case and what brought us here today, I got to tell you a little bit about Reese Taylor. Now, Reese is from right here in Waco, Texas. Grew up in elementary schools and middle schools and went on to Waco High and was a varsity level athlete. You know, it was in that time that Coach Taylor understood and became to realize his own passions. He went off to college and majored in athletic training and coaching, and he developed the passion for helping students. You see, coaching was much more than the accolades, the wins, and the successes of the actual players for Coach Reese. It was about cultivating that next generation of leaders, activists, doctors, lawyers, engineers, people who would go out there and make a difference. And Coach Reese understood that there's a lot of tangible skills students learn from just playing soccer. Leadership, drive, focus, teamwork, all of these skills Coach Reese wanted to instill in his students. Yes, Coach Reese was a tough coach. Yes, Coach Reese pushed his students, but he saw successes from it. Those successes are exactly why the plaintiff, Rory Street's mother, was the one who hired Coach Reese to be Rory's soccer coach 6 years ago at Waco High School. And Coach Reese, his efforts, they made the difference. You're going to learn that for the past 6 years at Waco High School, those students have been successful. Graduating class after graduating class has gone on to do great things because Coach Reese instilled those skills. They won regional finals, championship games. They were doing great things. All the drills Coach Taylor was running, those were drills that had been run for decades before Coach Taylor even got to Waco High School. Even that Burma road drill you're going to hear a lot about today. But in order for you, Your Honor, to truly understand how we got here today, you got to understand the relationship that Rory had with soccer. You see, Rory started playing soccer when she was just 4 years old. Her mom got her into the activity. You know, her mom was someone who played soccer at Waco High School and had always loved the game. So she thought, hey, maybe my daughter will love the game too. And, you know, Miss Street is sitting out there. She sees her daughter on the field and she starts dribbling through folks, shooting goals. I mean, this 4-year-old was a prodigy. The next Pele, the next Melee, you name it. Now, Rory, she began to play soccer more often and more frequently. Because Rory was so good, Rory was so talented, you're going to learn that she spent many times and many days, many waking hours practicing, running through drills, traveling for competitions. I mean, this kid was outstanding. And everyone saw it. As Rory got older and older, so much time, all of Rory's time was spent playing soccer. You'll learn that her mother tried to give her some competitive advantages. You'll learn that Miss Street, Rory's mother, actually held Rory back in the 7th grade. She figured that Rory's grades were great, but by the time that Rory got to high school, if she was held back a grade, well, she'll be bigger and stronger than the other students and be able to have that competitive advantage to get that D1 scholarship, to go to that fantastic school. Do we blame her for that? No, quite the opposite. We can all understand how a parent wants their child to do best. I would love for my child to go and play Division I athletics and get a great scholarship at a great institution and also have a great education. But you'll learn that once Rory started approaching sophomore year, junior year, and senior year of high school, well, Rory's love for the game of soccer wasn't the same as her mother's love for the game. You're going to hear from Aubrey today, one of Rory's best friends. You're going to learn that at this time, Rory was stressed. Rory was going through it. Rory's at that pivotal time in life where she was trying to figure out herself, right? Her parents had always wanted her to go off and be the star athlete, to be outstanding. But Rory didn't want that anymore. Rory wanted to be a normal high schooler. Rory was still trying to figure herself out. She didn't know if she wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer, or engineer, but she knew she didn't want to play soccer anymore. You're going to learn that stress, that anxiety, it took a toll on Rory. She felt like she couldn't go to her mother and tell her, I didn't want to play soccer anymore. She didn't want to let everyone down who had been investing in her year after year. She didn't know what to do. Unfortunately, like many other teenagers in this country, Rory turned to drugs. She felt as though those drugs could take away some of the pain, some of the stress, some of that anxiety. That's what brings us to September 7th, 2018. You see, that day was like many other days here in Waco. It was hot. You know, oftentimes Waco here, it gets above 100 degrees. We just call that Tuesday, folks. You see, on that day, practice was ran like every other day. Coach Taylor was ready. He had taught during the day a health class, and he was ready to go out and start training and practicing with the students. At 3:15, the students got ready. They started to scrimmage each other. This was the beginning of the season. They were getting ready to be all-stars. They were going for that state championship this year. They were practicing and scrimmaging, and eventually Rory went to go run that Burma road drill. You're going to learn that this drill, it had happened for decades. Rory's mother was someone who ran this drill back in the 90s, way before Coach Taylor even thought about working for Waco High School. They called it a high school tradition. This is something Rory, Aubrey, and all those other students had been playing for years. And no incident had ever happened before September 7th of 2018. You'll learn that Rory also went through slide tackling drills, a common drill that happens all the time in athletics. Yes, this was a new version of that drill, but you'll learn that slide tackling is a part of the game. It was no different. It was during that slide tackling drill that Rory collapsed, started to seize, and by that time, it was too late. You see, Your Honor, it wasn't until a few days later that we realized what happened to Rory. You're going to see an autopsy report today, Your Honor, and a toxicology report that shows that Rory had cocaine in her system. In order to understand why that fact is so important, you're going to hear expert testimony from Spencer London, a toxicologist. He's going to explain that when you add cocaine to the body, it makes it difficult for your body to cool down. So while a normal athlete is out there running in 105-degree weather, they can sweat profusely, they can cool their body down. When you add cocaine to the mix, it makes it difficult. It makes it nearly impossible for your body to cool down adequately. And when Rory's body couldn't cool down, she died. Your Honor, this case isn't about some coaching technique on behalf of Coach Reese that he'd been using for decades with countless of other students, Your Honor. It's not about what specifically necessarily happened that day. It's about the struggles of an 18-year-old kid who just wanted to make people happy and didn't know how to deal with it. You'll learn that Rory, Aubrey, an athletic trainer, no one saw any signs, no one complained, no one said anything. It was impossible for Coach Taylor to know and foresee that something like this could happen. It's for those reasons, Your Honor, that at the end of today's trial, I'm going to come back before you and I'm going to ask, you find Coach Reese not responsible. Thank you.
Okay, does plaintiff want to call your first witness?
Actually, Your Honor, before we call our live witness today, I would like to read onto the record a highlighted portion of the expert report from the plaintiff expert, a medical doctor in this case. As opposing counsel mentioned in pretrial, this exhibit has already been admitted. So I'd just like to read 2 or 3 sections of that report onto the record, if it's all right with the court.
That's fine.
And I intend to publish that as well at this point.
Okay.
Ms. Zhao, can you put that up on the screen, please? Now, I want to turn to that second page there, starting with the section that says Overview of Opinion. It reads in relevant part, Rory Street died as a result of heat exhaustion and/or heat stroke. Moving on to the bottom portion of that page, it reads, Aubrey Saracen described Rory Street was playing sloppy on the day in question. Once Rory Street was running Burma Road, Aubrey Saracen described her as being really struggling and unusually pale. According to Aubrey Saracen, at that point, Rory Street said she was feeling funny and complained of chest pain. Moments later, when Coach Taylor had Rory line up to the slide tackling drill, Aubrey Saracen described Rory as really pale, like lifeless almost, hands on her hips and breathing heavy. Finally, after the 15th slide tackle, Aubrey Saracen described Rory laying on the ground, groaning and convulsing. Finally, Your Honor, towards the bottom of that page, it reads in relevant part, it is also my opinion, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that Rory Street's death was not a result of cocaine use. Now, having highlighted those portions of the expert report, we are ready to call our first witness.
Okay, go ahead.
At this time, Your Honor, we call Aubrey Saracen to the stand.
It is not allowing me to start my video.
Wonderful.
It says the host must start the video.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Ms. Saracen, please introduce yourself to the court.
I'm Aubrey Saracen.
And how old are you?
I'm 18.
Where do you live, Ms. Saracen?
I live here in Waco.
Do you go to school currently?
Yes, I'm a senior at Waco High.
So what are your plans for next year once you graduate?
Next year, I'm going to Rice University, and I'm going to study engineering, maybe walk on the soccer team, I don't really know, but going to Rice.
Now, you mentioned soccer just a moment ago. Do you currently play soccer?
Yes.
How long have you played for?
I've played soccer all my life since I was a little kid and all through high school.
Now, Ms. Saracen, you know that you're here today to talk about one of your soccer teammates, Rory Street. Can you explain to the judge what your relationship was with Ms. Street?
Well, we were teammates on the soccer team. And I mean, we were more than that. We were best friends. We hung out all the time. Either I was at her house or she was at my house almost all the time.
Now, I know this might be difficult, given that she was your best friend, but I'd like to talk about the day that Rory died, okay?
Okay.
Now, were you with her on September 7th, 2018?
Yes, I was.
What happened that day?
Well, we were at soccer practice. Soccer was typically it started at 3:15.
And what was Miss Street doing before she passed away that day?
Practicing soccer with the team on the field outside school.
Do you recall if in the moments before her death, she was doing any kind of drill at that point?
Yes, we were doing a drill called the Burma Road, and then she did this new slide tackle drill thing that Coach had her do.
Now, after that slide tackle drill, did you see what happened to Miss Street at that point?
Yes, he did.
What did she appear to be like?
Just in the drill, she collapsed, and then the last time she didn't get back up. She convulsed and she just died right there.
Now, I do want to take it step by step and go through everything that happened that day. But first, let's just make something clear. Who was instructing her to do that drill that day?
Coach.
When you say coach, who are you referring to?
Coach Reese.
Is that Reese Taylor, the defendant in this case?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so let's talk just a bit about what happened that afternoon and what the defendant and Ms. Street were doing. Now, you mentioned soccer practice started at 3:15 that day. Do you remember anything about the weather in specific?
It was hot. It was really hot. It was a scorcher and just sunny and blazing.
And when you have your soccer practices, where did they take place at the school?
They're in the fields that are kind of out back of the high school.
Now, Ms. Saracen, do you have a copy of Exhibit 2 in front of you?
Yes, I
Could,
do.
could you go ahead and take a look at that for me, please, and let me know when you've got it up?
I've got it up.
Now, do you recognize what Exhibit 2 is?
Yes, it's like an aerial shot of our soccer practice fields.
And does it have any sort of markings on it?
Yes, it's got two kind of outline boxes that are blue and red.
Does this appear to be a fair and accurate depiction of the way you saw that soccer field on September 7th?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this time, I offer Exhibit 2 into evidence.
With no objection, Your Honor.
Okay, it's admitted.
Ms. Zhao, if you can put Exhibit 2 up on the screen, please. Now, Ms. Saracen, we just mentioned a second ago that there are two different colored boxes here. Can you explain to the judge what each of those boxes represent?
Well, the blue square is where we did our practicing for soccer, and then the red square is where we would do the Burma Road.
And anywhere around either of those squares, or in this entire fielded area generally, are there any trees for you to take breaks under?
No, there's no trees.
On September 7th, 2018, were there any tents out around the field?
No, there were no tents.
Was there any shaded area at all on that soccer field?
No, there's no shade.
Now, you mentioned that you run the Burma Road drill over on that red square. Can you explain what Burma Road is?
Well, it's a drill where first you sprint for 30 yards, then you dribble the ball for 30 yards, and then you try to kick the ball to the goal, and then you bear crawl all the way back, which is 60 yards. So it's intense.
Ms. Zhao, can you take that exhibit down now? Thank you. You just mentioned that you would have to go run Burma Road on that field. Who would instruct you to run that drill?
Coach Reese.
And why did Coach Reese use this drill?
For punishment when we weren't
Objection, Your Honor, is the lack of foundation. Speculation as well as to why Coach Reese specifically ran this drill.
Your Honor, if I may respond briefly,
Yes.
This witness just testified that she's on the soccer team coached by Coach Reese and that he would have them run this drill. She can testify as to why he had them run this drill, what the point of that drill was for the players on the team.
So I'm going to sustain the objection right now. If you can lay the foundation that she had the knowledge of why, then please
Sure.
go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Saracen, did you ever learn why Coach Taylor would have you run this drill?
Yes, I did.
And why was that?
Well, from my own experience, it was when I didn't do something that she was looking for.
Objection, Your Honor, as to how she would know why specifically Coach Taylor ran that drill. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have an objection to relevance as well, because we're here today to talk about what happened on September 7th of 2018, and it's only probative as to why Coach Taylor ran that drill specifically on that day for why we're here for today's purposes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, if I may, if this witness is allowed to continue testifying, it's our belief that she'll say that this drill was typically used as punishment or discipline when players weren't playing at their best. She'll testify that that's why it was being used on September 7th of 2018. But as that's the motivation behind using that drill, those prior instances when it was run, what that motivation was for running it, that is relevant today.
So I agree that there is some relevance. So I'm going to overrule it on that to that extent. She can testify as to what her belief was, her opinion as to why the drills were run, but unless she has personal knowledge that you can lay the foundation that she actually knew specifically why the coach ran the drills, then I'm going to sustain it as to that. If that's
Yes, Your Honor.
Move to strike the testimony to hit the record as to that point, Your Honor.
Granted, it's stricken.
Now, Ms. Saracen, why did you believe that players had to run this drill?
I believed it was for punishment when we weren't doing what coach wanted.
Describe what he would, you talked about what Burma Road entailed. How often would the defendant make people run these drills?
Whenever he wanted to.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
How long would you typically run that drill for on any given day?
Oh, it would go on a while. I mean, sometimes it would feel like it was never going to end.
Now, focusing specifically on the day that Ms. Street passed away, how was the defendant behaving towards her that day, as far as you could tell?
He was angry.
What makes you think that?
He was.
Again, it's a speculation that he was angry. Getting into the mindset of Coach Taylor is
Sustained, if you can lay the foundation as to how she knew that.
Yes, Your Honor.
testimony, Your Honor.
It's stricken.
Did you hear Coach Taylor yelling at her or telling her to do anything that day?
Yes, coach was screaming at her. I was like ways away, and I could even hear from where I was. It was very loud.
Now, after Coach Taylor started screaming at Miss Street, what did he direct her to do?
To go run the Burma Road where I was at the time. She said she was going to run her till she passed out.
And do you recall about how far into practice this was?
It was a ways into practice, over an hour into practice, so after maybe 4:15, 4:30.
Now, before he made Miss Street go over and do bear crawls, run Burma Road, did he have her take a break first?
No, he did not.
After you saw him yelling at her, did you see him give her any water before she went over to Burma Road?
No, no water.
Did he get the trainer over at that point to make sure she was safe?
No, the trainer wasn't nearby.
Now, when she came over to Burma Road, did you notice anything about her appearance at that time?
She was really pale and was looked like she was really struggling.
Was that normal for Rory in your time knowing her?
No, it was super uncharacteristic of everything I'd ever seen from her. She's an incredible athlete, and I've seen her play a game of soccer when her nose was broken and not even complain. So yeah, it was not something I was used to seeing for sure.
Now, after you saw that she was struggling as you just described her, did you get a chance to do anything?
No, not really.
Why not?
Well, I was there with her, but not really anything I could do about it. Complaining would have made it worse.
Did Coach Taylor instruct her at that point to do any sort of other drill or anything further?
After we'd been running the Burma Road and she was struggling, Coach noticed and said that she was lollygaggling and just wasn't doing it what Coach wanted. So she had her go over to practice field to do a slide tackling drill.
Now, let's get into what that slide tackling drill entailed. For those of us that aren't so familiar with soccer, can you just briefly explain what slide tackling is?
It's when you're running at an opposing player and you just go at them feet first, trying to slide into them and knock the ball away. But I mean, it can get kind of violent.
And how was this drill set up?
It wasn't like anything we'd done before. Rory was there, and then Coach had all the other team members line up in a line and when coach would blow her whistle, they just one after another would run and slide tackle at Rory.
When they slide tackled Rory, did she ever fall to the ground?
Yes, every time she'd fall down and was really struggling every time.
Now, at any point between those two drills, did Coach Taylor tell her to go take a break?
No, just the opposite. Rory was on the ground and coach grabbed the back of her shirt and just yanked her up and had her do it all over again.
When she had collapsed to the ground several times, as you mentioned, did Coach Taylor ever call the trainer over to check on her?
No.
At any point during that drill, when she had fallen again and again and again, did he stop the drill so that she could have a break?
No, he did not stop.
Ms. Saracen, based on what you saw that day, roughly how many times was Ms. Street tackled to the ground at the coach's direction?
About 15 times.
And after that 15th time, what happened to her?
She fell and she just kind of started shaking and convulsing. I was so scared, and she was lifeless.
Well, thank you. Your Honor, I have nothing further at this time, and I pass the witness.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Ms. Saracen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
I want to start off by talking about the conditions that you normally practice under at Waco High. Now, you typically start practice in August, right?
That's right.
And when you start practice in August, you know it can get kind of hot.
Texas heat, yes.
Yeah, to use your words, it's not unusual for the temperatures to go above 100 degrees.
No, it's not.
Now, during the summertime, that's when the team is all practicing together, right?
Yes.
Normally at practice, water is always available.
Well, we can have water during breaks.
You know that water is always available during practice.
Yes, during breaks.
You also know that you're given breaks during practice, right?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes you'd have one break during practice.
Yes.
Sometimes more,
Sure.
maybe sometimes less.
Sure.
Now, there's always an athletic trainer there as well, right?
Right.
You know the athletic trainer is there looking out for your best interest.
I mean, that's their job, I guess.
You know the athletic trainer is there to make sure everyone's going to be healthy.
Yes.
You know the athletic trainer is there to make sure people are going to be safe.
Yes.
These are the conditions that you had been practicing under for the past 3 years in high school.
Right.
These are the conditions that Rory had been practicing under for the past 3 years in high school.
Yes.
These are the conditions that you practiced on September 7th of 2018.
Yes.
I want to talk about what normally happens after practice. Now, in direct examination, you were talking about some scrimmages, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You broke up just a little.
My apologies. Sometimes you would go through scrimmages at practice, right?
Yes.
And you would run drills.
Yes.
You would practice slide tackling.
Yes.
And sometimes you ran what's called Burma Road.
Right.
I want to make this clear for the judge. Burma Road, that's not the first time you ran that on September 7th, right?
No, it was not the first time I've done a Burma Road.
It wasn't the first time you ran Burma Road in weather above 100 degrees.
I'm sure I've done it before in hot weather.
You've been running Burma Road for years.
Yes.
Rory's been running Burma Road for years.
Yes.
You knew this was a tradition at Waco High.
Yes.
Now, before September 7th, no one had ever been injured running Burma Road to the best of your knowledge.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence. May I be heard? The only reason that this testimony would be used today is for propensity purposes, showing that no one got injured in the past so that an injury couldn't have occurred unless there was some other factor at play on the day in question is improper character evidence. It's typically called Rule 404B.
Your Honor, that's not how Rule 404B works. 404B regards to specific instances of conduct. The lack of something happening is not propensity, Your Honor. That's not what the intention of 404B is. It's specific instances of conduct. I'm not going through specific instances of conduct. I'm asking the witness whether or not something happened before.
Your Honor, if I may respond again. Under the federal rules, 405B, it's dealing with specific instances of conduct. 404 deals with crimes, wrongs, and other acts. This would fall under the other acts portion of that improper character evidence. It is stating that because no one had been injured, specifically that Rory hadn't been injured before doing this drill, that obviously something else was at play on the day in question. That's a direct violation of the rule here, and it shouldn't be permitted.
Your Honor, the lack of an act is not an act. That's not the intention of 404B. That's not how that works.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, you're muted at this time.
Thank you. It's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Prior to September 7th of 2018, to the best of your knowledge, no one had ever been injured running Burma Rail.
To my knowledge, no.
No one had ever been injured running any slide tackling drill.
I've been injured myself doing slide tackles. I mean, it's a rough thing.
To the best of your knowledge,
drills, but I don't know.
You can't recall a specific time someone had been injured in a slide tackling drill at practice.
No.
Now, I want to talk about what happened during that Burma Road drill on September 7th, 2018. Now, you and Rory were running this drill together, right?
Right.
Coach Taylor was not with you.
Well, we were all in the field, but we were kind of on different sides.
Coach Taylor was not with you.
Right.
To use your words, Coach Taylor was pretty far away.
Right.
The athletic trainer was also not with you.
That's correct.
It was just you and Rory running this drill, right?
Yes.
At no point did you tell Coach Taylor Rory was struggling.
No, of course not.
At no point did you tell the athletic trainer Rory was struggling.
No.
To the best of your knowledge, Rory never told Coach Taylor she was struggling.
No.
Rory never told the athletic director she was struggling.
Correct.
To use your words, Rory collapsed out of nowhere.
I mean, she did. Nobody expected her to die. I did, at least.
Rory collapsed out of nowhere.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Your Honor, the witness did not answer the question.
Your Honor, if I may, the witness did respond to the question. It just wasn't the answer that Mr. Okolo wanted.
It's sustained.
Rory collapsed suddenly.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered. This is the same nature of the question.
It's a different question, Your Honor.
Overruled for this question.
Yes, Your Honor.
Looking for a yes or no here, Ms. Saracen. Rory collapsed suddenly.
Well, yes.
Now, I want to talk about what Rory did share with you on that day. She told you that not on this day, she told you she had been stressed.
Yes, she had said she was stressed.
She was going through some hardships.
Yes.
She told you that she was stressed and felt pressure from her parents.
Sure.
She told you she felt pressure from wanting to be a Division I athlete.
Yes.
She told you she just wanted to be a normal kid.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance. May I be heard?
Go ahead.
The parties have already stipulated in this case that there was cocaine found in Miss Street's system. It's my belief that Mr. Okolo is trying to use this as some sort of motivation for her drug use on September 7th, 2018. But as the parties have stipulated, that's already in evidence today. And it's improper to explore that on this witness. that she was stressed. It doesn't weigh at all on the negligence at issue or Ms. Street's actions.
Your Honor, the probative value of this testimony goes to give you context and understanding as to the cocaine usage of Rory and what led her to that cocaine usage, making it possible that Rory ingested could potentially high amounts of cocaine prior to practice on September 7th that led to her having cardiac arrest, led to her body not being able to cool down, and led to the heat stroke, Your Honor. It's probative.
Your Honor, if I may respond briefly, that's all stipulated to, and it's not something opposing counsel is basically drawing an extrapolation from a conversation had this day, but that extrapolation is unnecessary. This is already in evidence.
Your Honor, we haven't stipulated to this fact. There are no stipulations in this case. We don't have a list of stipulations. This is probative testimony for Your Honor to hear to understand the nature of Rory's relationship with soccer, Rory's relationship with drug use.
Okay, it's overruled right now. However, if it continues going down a path that does not seem relevant, you can re-urge that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Saracen, Rory told you she just wanted to be a normal high schooler. I couldn't quite hear you. She just said she wanted to be a normal high schooler.
Yes, that's right.
Now, Ms. Saracen, did Rory ever tell you she used cocaine?
No.
Do you know that cocaine is an illegal drug?
Of course.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. Asking this witness about whether or not she understands cocaine is an illegal drug, that's just not relevant for the testimony today. There might be merit to asking about the pressures that may have taken her to force her to take that drug, but asking about its illegality on this witness is inappropriate.
Your Honor, relevance is a very low bar. It's probative to talk about the illegal drug use in today's case.
Yeah, it's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
You know that cocaine is an illegal drug.
Of course.
Did you know that cocaine could cause fatigue?
I have no idea.
Did you know cocaine could cause pale or flushed skin?
Objection, Your Honor. I have to re-raise at this time. This witness has no idea what the effects of cocaine are, and Mr. Okolo is asking her questions that would be better served by a medical professional, which again, the reports are stipulated admissible in this case.
Your Honor, the probative value of this testimony goes to show that this witness does not understand maybe necessarily what the symptoms of cocaine usage, and for her to describe the symptoms of Rory and attribute that to heat exhaustion could potentially be wrong. It goes to the credibility of this witness's testimony, Your Honor.
So I'm going to sustain the objection if you can lay a foundation that this witness would understand what those were symptoms of or how cocaine affects somebody, then feel free to go ahead.
Ms. Saracen, you don't know the symptoms of cocaine.
I don't have any personal experience, no.
You couldn't tell us today with certainty that Rory was suffering from a drug overdose.
I just know the symptoms I described.
Now, Ms. Saracen, I want to talk about why you may be pointing the finger at Coach Taylor today. Now, you've been playing soccer for some years now, right?
All my life.
You and Rory grew up playing soccer together.
That's right.
Now, Rory was talented, very talented.
The best.
She was a tough player.
Yes.
I mean, you told us that she had played an entire game with a broken nose.
Well, half a game with a broken nose.
She didn't complain about it.
No.
She pushed through.
That's right.
And you were a starting player with Rory, right?
We played together for years.
Two best friends on the starting lineup trying to win that championship.
It was our hope, yes.
But your starting spot got taken away, didn't it?
Well, I shared it, yes.
Your starting spot was taken from you.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered. This
Your Honor,
witness just stated that she shared that spot.
You can try to get a clearer answer.
Yes or no, that spot was taken away from you, Ms. Saracen?
Yes, that's how the game is.
The person that took it away from you was Coach Taylor.
That's her job. She's the coach.
Coach Taylor took your starting spot away from you.
Not completely, but yes, she determined where we played.
Is it your testimony that Coach Taylor did not take the starting spot away from you?
No, she determined where we played. She took that spot and then I shared it.
That made you angry.
That's not why I was angry at Coach Taylor.
Directing back to my question, Coach Taylor taking that top spot away from you, that made you angry, Ms. Saracen.
It bothered me, but that's not why I'm angry at her.
Ms. Saracen, to use your words, this made you upset, yes or no?
I was upset. Yes.
How are you here testifying today?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, you thought the decision was crap,
Oh, I did.
and now you're here testifying against Coach Taylor.
Yes.
Thank you. We have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
A brief redirect, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Now, Ms. Saracen, Mr. Okolo asked you just a moment ago about when breaks would be taken on practice days. I want to focus on September 7th, 2018. Can you clearly remember even one single break that you took all practice long that day?
No, I can't.
Now, with regard to Coach Taylor taking your spot and making you share it with someone else, does that in any way color the testimony that you've given about what you witnessed going on with Rory that day?
No, not at all.
Does it color your testimony about what you saw Coach Taylor do that day?
No, that's what happened.
Thank you, Ms. Saracen. Your Honor, I have nothing further.
Just a brief recross, Your Honor.
How brief?
Now, Ms. Saracen, you mentioned taking a break on redirect examination. The fact is you don't know whether you did or did not take a break that day.
I said I don't remember taking the break. No.
So you can't say with certainty that you did not have any breaks on September 7th of 2018.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered. This witness just said she doesn't remember taking a break that day.
Your Honor, the point is opposing counsel asked this witness, can you say with certainty that you did have a break? And she said, no. I'm asking her, can you say with certainty if you did not have a break? No. The probative value of this testimony goes to show she can't remember if she did or did not have a break, Your Honor.
I don't
Your
think
Honor,
question that plaintiff's counsel asked, and I think she said that she doesn't know.
that's correct.
So it's sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Rory, I'm sorry, Miss Saracen, you don't know what led to Aubrey's death on September 7th.
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope.
Your Honor, opposing counsel was asking about all the conditions that was under place. It's opposing counsel's position that because they didn't have a break, because they didn't have water, all the things talked about on redirect examination, that led to Rory's death. I'm asking her whether or not she can know what led to Rory's death.
Your Honor, if I may, the scope of my redirect examination focused only on if she remembered a break and if her testimony was colored by the bias that Mr. Okolo alleged. He's now asking about what caused this death. That's outside the scope of my redirect examination.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Saracen, you don't know what caused Rory Street's death on September 7th of 2018.
I don't know.
Thank you. We have no further questions, Your Honor.
Your Honor, with that, may this witness be excused.
Yeah.
And Your Honor, at this time, we have no further witnesses and the plaintiff rests its case in chief.
Okay. Defense?
Your Honor, at this time, pursuant to Rule 50, we'd like to move for a directed verdict. If I may be heard on this motion, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, it's the plaintiff's responsibility in today's case to prove foreseeability, that Coach Taylor could have foreseen this incident or what happened on September 7th leading to Rory's death, Your Honor. That has not been proven today, Your Honor. Opposing counsel had that burden of proof. We haven't heard anything relating to whether or not Coach Taylor saw symptoms of Rory, saw Rory struggling, or saw anything that would have let Coach Taylor know Rory needed a break or Rory wasn't okay. We've heard that Rory didn't speak up. We've heard that Aubrey didn't say anything. We've heard that the trainer that was there and supposed to be looking out for the student's health said nothing and no one was concerned, Your Honor. It's impossible for Coach Taylor to have foreseen something like this happen and for his actions to then not be what a reasonable person would have done. We've heard that Burma Road has been ran for decades, Your Honor, that many students have gone through this drill, Your Honor. It's not like there's no way opposing counsel can show that what Coach Taylor did on that day was somehow not what a reasonable coach would have done when the drill's been run for years, Your Honor.
May I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, under Rule 50, these facts are viewed in the light most favorable to the non-moving party. Now, in this case, that's the plaintiff. And today, a reasonable fact finder, yourself, Your Honor, you could certainly find in favor of the plaintiff. For example, Ms. Saracen just testified to all of the symptoms that Ms. Street was exhibiting that afternoon, not only on Burma Road, but also as Coach Taylor had her line up for another drill and was standing right there instructing them in that drill. Ms. Saracen characterized Ms. Street as having her hands on her hips, gasping for air, looking pale, looking lifeless, clearly struggling. If the coach was standing right there, these are certainly things that he could notice. You'll also note that there were no breaks remembered by that witness that were given to them that day. No breaks in between those drills. The trainer wasn't called over after the coach instructed Ms. Street knocked to the ground 15 times by her fellow teammates. What's more, Your Honor, you have in evidence the expert report, the only expert report prepared by a medical doctor. That was the plaintiff's witness today who testified that her cause of death was heat stroke and not use of cocaine. As such, a reasonable fact finder could find in favor of the plaintiff, and we ask that you deny that motion.
Okay, the motion is denied.
Yes, Your Honor. With that, may we take a brief 2 to 3 minute recess?
I'll give you 2 minutes because we're on a very tight time clock.
Yes, Your Honor. I'll hurry back.
Okay, thank you. All right, are the parties ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Plaintiff is ready.
Okay, go ahead.
First, Your Honor, the defense would like to call, by way of deposition, Jordan Street, the plaintiff in this case, Rory's mother.
Okay.
I'm just going to have my second chair here hop on the screen, and we're going to read portions of that deposition for Your Honor's reference.
Okay.
Starting on page 2, line 5. Good morning. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jordan Street.
How old are you?
I'm 55 years old.
Where are you from?
I live in Waco and have all my life.
Are you married?
I am not. I was married, but my spouse passed away several years ago.
Do you have any children?
I did. My daughter, Rory.
Going to page 3, line 1. Were you at practice that day?
No, I was at work.
So do you have any information or knowledge about what happened that day?
No, other than what I've heard from others about what happened, but I didn't see it.
Moving down to line 20. When did Rory start playing soccer?
Oh gosh, when she was little, 4 or 5 years old, I went and signed her up to get her started with just being out and being athletic and being around other kids. But she took right to it and never looked back. Before you knew it, we were spending weekends driving all over Texas to soccer tournaments. And the next 12 years or so, we were just kind of a blur. Soccer tournaments, soccer practices, soccer camps, soccer everything.
Was soccer something the two of you shared?
You know, I played soccer in college, so I already loved the game, but I didn't care what sport it was. I just loved having a kid that was into sports of any kind. I loved getting up on the weekends when she was little to go kick the ball in the backyard and let her dribble it past me. I loved talking about games and strategy. It brought back so many good memories of my playing days. But this was even better because it was my kid, and it made her happy. By the time Rory was in high school, we even had a favorite team, West Ham United, that we rooted on together every weekend during the English Premier League season. We loved going to T-Bone's barbecue to watch the games, and I thought we would be forever blowing bubbles.
Page 5, line 5. Do you still play, like in local non-competitive matches?
No, I had to quit my junior year of college because I had a pretty serious injury during the game. An opposing player slide tackled me from behind and broke my leg and ankle in several places. I could have played my senior year, but I just wasn't as good as I used to be and decided not to continue. I enjoyed playing with Rory while she was young, though.
Page 5, line 12. Did you push Rory to be an athlete?
I don't know if I would use the word push. I encouraged Rory to work hard at sports and at everything else in her life. I taught Rory to never show weakness and to never complain. I wanted her to be tough, to play through the pain, because that's what makes a champion. Rory was tough because I made her tough.
Line 19. Did you ever hold Rory back in school?
We did just 1 year. We held her back in the 7th grade so that she can get bigger and faster, which we thought would give her an advantage in high school playing against younger kids. And I know that sounds a bit crazy, but it was actually pretty common now. College is expensive, and we wanted to give Rory the best chance we could at getting a scholarship. Hell, Rory might have even been good enough to go pro. I certainly saw the possibility and encouraged Rory to keep that option open.
Did you have to stay on top of Rory to make sure she was practicing and keeping up with exercise?
Not any more than any other parent of a teenager. Rory sometimes wanted to goof off instead of following Coach Taylor's non-practice exercise routines, and I would have to remind her of what soccer means for college, maybe a pro career.
Moving down to page 7, line 3, number 10 for your reference, Drew. Do you believe that discipline is important for a kid?
Yes, 100% yes. You know, my granddaddy always said, spare the rod, spoil the child. And I believe in that. You can't let them get away with being lazy and entitled. You have to keep them in line.
Line 8. Did Rory regularly visit his or her pediatrician?
At least once a year for a physical.
During any of those yearly physicals, were there any issues?
None. Rory had never had any serious medical issues, just normal kid stuff.
Line 19. When you were playing soccer at Waco High, did you ever have to run Burma Road?
Hell yeah, we did. I remember doing that when we were dogging it, or if we weren't in the correct position or something. Coach would send us off to run Burma Road. But I'll tell you this, none of my coaches ever made me or any other kid keep going when it was obvious that we were exhausted. Discipline is one thing, but that is just dangerous.
Page 9, line 11. Did you have any part in Coach Taylor being hired?
Yes, I was instrumental in getting Coach Taylor hired. Wish I hadn't been, but I was.
Why did you want Coach Taylor?
We wanted a winning coach. I wanted Rory to be coached by a winner. That was what we wanted, and we thought that Coach Taylor was the right person for the job. Looking back now, it was obviously a huge mistake on my part.
Thank you. And with that, Your Honor, we have no further deposition testimony from Jordan Street.
Okay. Does plaintiff have any testimony they want to read in at this time?
We don't want to read any in at this time, Your Honor. We just ask that the remainder of the document be constructively entered into the record.
Your Honor, we would object to that.
Your Honor, if I may.
What's the basis for that?
The rest of the document is hearsay, Your Honor. We don't believe it's appropriate for the document in its entirety to just be entered into evidence.
Okay.
May I respond?
Yes. What's your basis for admitting this?
Your Honor, this witness is stipulated as unavailable today, and under Federal Rule of Evidence 804B1, prior deposition testimony under oath is automatically admissible when a witness is unavailable.
Your Honor,
if you'd like to read portions of the deposition testimony in, you are welcome to do that, but we can't just constructively admit the entire deposition.
That's fine, Your Honor. We don't plan to read any more in.
Okay.
and at this time, Your Honor, by way of deposition, we'd like to call our second witness, Jess Merriweather.
Okay, go ahead.
Starting on page 2, line 6. Good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Hello there. My name is Jess Merriweather.
Where do you live?
I live in Waco, Texas.
How long have you lived in Waco?
Just a couple years now. I grew up in Houston, then I went to Texas A&M for undergrad, and then I got a master's degree in sports training from A&M as well. After that, I worked for a couple years at another high school in College Station before I got a job at Waco High.
What was your job at Waco High?
I'm an athletic trainer, and I also teach health.
What is the job of an athletic trainer?
We have various teams and activities at the school that involve some level of physical activity and competition. Everything from football to soccer to volleyball to cheerleading and drill team. And as a trainer, I would work with students that participate in those activities to keep them healthy and in shape and to treat any injuries that they might have.
Page 3, line 4. Do you attend practices?
Yes, depending on the time of the year, it might be football or soccer or something else, but there is always a trainer at any official practice for our various athletic teams.
Did you do any athletic training while you were at A&M?
That was the whole point of the program. I worked with football players, track athletes, basketball players, and more while completing my master's degree in sports training. So it isn't like the job at Waco was the first time that I've ever done athletic training.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to qualify Jess Merriweather as an expert in athletic training.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. This witness isn't present. We can't cross-examine her as an expert in this case. So having this deposition testimony after the fact qualified as expert testimony is inappropriate today. We can't establish the prongs of her under 702 or any of the controlling case law, controlling what experts may say.
Your Honor, it was opposing counsel who deposed this witness, and opposing counsel was well aware of these opinions before we came into trial today. Opposing counsel was aware of this deposition when he took the deposition back in 2019, Your Honor, and is aware that we were intending to do this.
In that case, Your Honor, I haven't received any notice that they intended to offer this witness as an expert. I haven't received any records of compensation. I haven't received an expert report. I haven't received any opinions that this proposed expert came to in this case. This witness is unavailable today, and I can't cross-examine on any of those things. And because they failed to provide notice, I didn't have the opportunity at the previous deposition to cross on those things.
Yeah, Mr. Merriweather will not be an expert.
Yes, Your Honor.
Page 4, line 12. Do you have any role in designing drills for practices?
No, that is all Coach Taylor.
Do you have any role in disciplining players?
No, that is all Coach Taylor as well. I am certainly there overseeing any on-field discipline that takes place, but I'm not directing that discipline or deciding who should be disciplined.
What about cocaine? How does that affect an athlete?
Objection, Your Honor. Improper opinion in this case. May I be heard? Your Honor, I believe you're muted.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, you just held that this witness would not be admitted as an expert today. Allowing the deposition testimony to opine to the effects of a controlled substance on an athlete's body is expert testimony. And under 702, because those prongs can't be met, we ask that this portion be excluded.
If I may, Your Honor.
Yeah, can you tell me the page and line number again?
It's going to be page 5, line 15, Your Honor.
Okay,
This
continue.
witness is not going to go into some expert testimony, Your Honor. Quite frankly, the witness is going to say cocaine is particularly dangerous, if I may proffer. This isn't going to go into some sort of expert testimony. This is a lay witness opinion. As a health teacher at the high school, someone who does athletic training, she could say cocaine is dangerous.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
What about cocaine? How does that affect an athlete?
Cocaine is particularly dangerous. It killed Len Bias and Don Rogers. Diego Maradona had a 20-year addiction, and that derailed his career. Dale Strawberry and Dwight Gooden also come to mind.
Page 5, line 24. Was Rory a good student?
Objection, Your Honor. Substantially more prejudicial than probative. May I be heard?
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Was Rory a good student?
She was smart, if that's what you're asking, but I wouldn't call her a good student.
Why not?
Rory always had a discipline problem. It seems like she thought that she could do whatever she wanted to do because she was a star athlete. And the worst part is that nothing fazed her. You could always send Rory to the principal's office all day long, but she didn't care because that was just an excuse to get out of class. The only discipline I ever saw work was Coach Taylor's discipline.
Page 8, line 8. Were you at practice the day Rory died?
I was.
Did you see Rory running Burma Road?
I saw Rory over on Burma Road, but I wasn't watching her closely.
Did you ever see Rory during the slide tackling drill?
Again, I saw what was happening, and I certainly saw parts of it, but I didn't watch it closely.
What were you doing while all this was going on?
I was taping another student's ankle about 40 yards away.
At any time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in any way that would have indicated she was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was a really hot day.
Did Rory ever say anything to you about feeling bad that day?
Nope, never said anything to me. And here's the thing. I'm there to take care of those players, and they know it. And I'm kind of a combination trainer and guardian to the team. So they trust me, and I trust them to tell me if something is wrong or if they're hurting. Rory didn't say a word. and she would have. Rory was a tough kid, and she knew her limits and would let me or coach know when she needed water.
Page 9, line 9. Are players allowed to get water when they need it?
Yes, all they have to do is ask, even if we weren't on water break.
And with that, Your Honor, we have no more further deposition testimony from Jess Merriweather.
Okay, does plaintiff want to read in any testimony?
No, Your Honor, we don't intend to read in any of this testimony.
Okay,
At this time, Your Honor, the defense would like to call Coach Reese Taylor to the stand.
okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury? Go ahead and unmute your mic there.
Yes, my name is Reese Taylor.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I grew up in Waco, went to A&M to get some education on physical education. I'm a coach, sports, love them. I've taught everything in high schools for a number of years. Yeah, that's just a little bit about myself.
What made you get into coaching?
Man, I just loved it. We're shaping, the youth of our future, and, like discipline is a big thing, and, it opens doors for them. It's a good thing to get involved in, and prosper further.
How long have you been coaching now?
Oh, a number of years. I mean, I've been at Waco High itself for about 6 years. Before that, I've coached for a number of years as well.
What sport do you coach at Waco?
So right now I coach the soccer team, but I have coached basketball, volleyball, and all the others.
I want to talk about what a normal soccer practice looks like at Waco High School.
Sure.
What are you doing during practice?
Everything from the conditioning to, the normal basics of the game. So you got your slide tackling, you got dribbling, playing defense, soccer basics, I guess.
We've been hearing a lot today about a drill called Burma Road.
Yes.
You familiar with that drill?
I am. I did it myself back in the 90s when, that's when it became a tradition. And when I attended Waco High myself, I did Burma Roads.
Is the drill dangerous?
No. It's a drill, and, it builds conditioning, and all players go through it, or whoever the coach decides that, it's time for them to kind of, buckle down a little bit more, or kind of focus a little bit more. They do the Burma Road.
I want to take a moment and shift towards safety.
Sure.
As you coach at the high school, do you got to take any safety precautions for your students?
Yes, absolutely. We always make sure to have, water there. We take breaks. I have Jess on the field as well, at the practices as well. Jess is the trainer, like you just read in, just to make sure that all the students are fine, healthy, and to make sure that, they're performing in a safe environment, because, in high school, when these kids are playing soccer, they're at a really good physique. And when you're at that good of a physique, for you to be, performing as best as you can, you need to be healthy.
Why is it important you take these safety precautions as the coach at Waco High?
So I think any coach should take the safety precautions as seriously and as importantly. And the reason I say that is because, the kids are performing at, their peak. And specifically, I make sure to do that. And that's why I'm able to condition these kids and to win, championships and districts, win districts.
Now I want to talk about one of those special kids you had.
Sure.
Are you familiar with Rory Street?
I am.
Was Rory a good soccer player?
Yes.
Have you had any great soccer players like Rory?
She was extremely good.
Was Rory a tough soccer player?
She was tough. Yes.
Did you have a good relationship with Rory?
I like to believe that we had a healthy one. I mean, she was varsity. She was in her senior year. I've been there for 6 years. So we had a longer, healthy coaching lifestyle. Her mother helped me get hired, or her mother played a part in me getting hired. So there was already history there of understanding my coaching techniques, Yes, I'd like to think that we had a great relationship.
Did you feel as though Rory would tell you if something was wrong?
Absolutely.
I want to talk about September 7th, 2018.
Okay,
You remember that day?
I do.
How'd that day begin for you?
It began, with practice around 3:15, 3:30. We were practicing and I noticed, Rory was dogging it, just, not taking it seriously as much. And, I had her do some drills.
Why'd you have her do those drills?
Cause it just seemed like Rory's an exceptional player, right? And an exceptional player on the team kind of sets how the other players act and, how they, I guess, take the discipline. So, if you have your star player, if you have your star forward, lollygagging and stuff, and you don't, discipline them, your team discipline goes down, and that doesn't win championships. That doesn't, make us ready for competition.
Before you sent Rory over to Burma Road, did you feel as though there were any health concerns with Rory?
Absolutely not.
Did she tell you about any health concerns?
No, she did not.
Did any of the teammates tell you about any health concerns?
No, they didn't.
What about that athletic trainer?
No, the athletic trainer didn't notice anything as well.
So after Burma Road happened, what happened next?
So after Burma Road happened, I could tell that even over there, she wasn't performing as she, can. And I'm a coach. I push kids to their potential, and I know that these kids know their limits, and I would never push, a student to go beyond what their limits are. And when she was at the Burma Road, she wasn't doing it as much. So, she's a star player. A lot of players are going to come at her during a game. So I had her do slide tackling drills, essentially where the students would line up and come at her and try to perform a slide tackle.
If you saw that Rory was struggling, would you have stopped the drill?
Sorry?
If you saw that Rory was having a tough time, having some sort of health complications, would you have stopped the drill?
If I saw health complications, absolutely. Their safety is our first priority. You think about it this way. If they're not healthy, are they going to be able to perform well? No. Are we going to do well as a team? No. Why would you go down that route? Nobody would do that.
Now, I want to talk about some symptoms of heat exhaustion.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to ask my second chair here to put up a document. This is the Exhibit 16, Your Honor, which has already been pre-admitted, the second page of Exhibit 16 of the plaintiff's expert that talks about symptoms of heat exhaustion. Now, looking at this document here, looking at all the symptoms of heat exhaustion, did you see these symptoms in Rory on September 7th, 2018?
Some of these are normal, right? Like you're sweating. Everybody sweats, and they all sweat. That's normal. She was a little fatigued, but everybody was. It's during practice. Nobody's going to be up and at 'em running the entire, time of practice. Like it makes normal sense. But anything else? No, I didn't see a single thing.
Was Rory's behavior any different from the tens of other students you were coaching at that same time?
No.
Thank you. We have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Coach Taylor.
Hey.
Now, I want to get into your coaching career first before we move on to Rory Street and the day in question, all right?
Okay.
Now, you said you've been coaching for over 20 years, haven't you?
Right.
You said you like to win.
Right.
You would agree with me that you're competitive.
Yep.
And you mentioned a moment ago that in order to stay competitive, you push your players.
Yes.
One of the players that you pushed to be your best was Miss Street.
I push all players to do their best. It's a team sport.
And that included Miss Street, right?
Yeah, she's on the team.
Well, she was on the team that you were coaching on September 7th, 2018.
Yeah.
And you'd been coaching her on that varsity team for several years at that point, hadn't you?
Right.
You told us on direct examination that you thought you had a good coach-player relationship, didn't you?
Agree.
Safe to say she trusted you.
I'd like to think so.
Now, besides being a coach for the varsity soccer team, you also teach, don't you?
Yeah, PE, physical education.
But you also teach health classes, right?
Yep,
And that means that you know about bodily health.
I do.
In fact, your degree was in physical education.
It was.
Now, when it's hot outside
Mhm.
It's important to make sure that your players are safe.
Yes,
It's important to make sure that they drink water.
that is important.
It's important to make sure that they take breaks, Coach Taylor.
Right.
If possible, they should take those breaks in the shade, right?
I mean, that depends on the player, right? It depends on if the practice just started or not. I mean, that's situational, that's circumstantial, depending on the practice and stuff. I used to practice outside, and if there was no shade, we still took a break. That doesn't necessarily mean that because there was no shade, there was no break.
Well, Coach, we all know that it gets hot in Waco in the summer, right?
Every summer.
And you know that you have to avoid pushing people too hard when there's too high heat.
Yes.
So you have to pay attention to what the temperature is when you're practicing, don't you?
Yes.
In fact, Coach, you do pay attention to that.
Yes.
But instead of avoiding that heat, you actually like to have your players practice in it, don't you?
I mean, it helps, right? Like if you can play in, I don't know, 100-degree weather when it's down to like 70 or something, your conditioning is going to be stronger. Like that's common sense, isn't it?
So you intentionally have your players play in 100-degree weather.
I mean, it's not like, okay, it's 100 degrees, let's go practice now. No, it's like we have practices scheduled. If it gets a little bit hotter like it normally does every single year, then we still practice.
Coach, to use your exact words here, you have them practice in the heat and the sun to condition them because it toughens them up, doesn't it?
I mean, I feel like I just said something similar to that.
Ms. Zhao, can you put up Exhibit 2, please? Now, on the afternoon in question, you had the girls start practice at 3:15, 3:30-ish, right?
Yeah.
And that picture on the screen there, that shows the practice field you were at that day, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Now, that blue box on the left side, that's the main field where everyone was scrimmaging, right?
Right.
And that red box over to the right, that's where Burma Road was done?
Right.
Okay, now that afternoon when you were practicing in the heat, there were no trees nearby, were there?
No, there weren't.
On September 7th of 2018, there were no tents set up out around the field for shade.
No, there weren't at that time.
And that's exactly how you want it, right? So that they can toughen themselves up in the sun?
I wouldn't say that's how I wanted it. Like there's no trees, no tents, nothing there. No, when we practiced, there was nothing there.
But you did want them to get toughened up by being in the heat and the sun.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Your Honor, if I may, I'm clarifying the answer that the witness gave.
It's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. So just to be clear here, Coach, you did want them to practice in the heat and the sun so they could toughen up.
It does condition them better, yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Zhao, can you take down that slide, please? Now, Coach, you do a lot of training to make sure that you're following best practices, right?
Yes.
You go to clinics all over the state of Texas.
Yep.
And you attend these clinics to make sure that you know what drills you're supposed to do, right?
Right.
What techniques can help your players improve.
Yep.
And how to keep your players safe.
Right.
Now, when it's hot outside, like we mentioned, you do try to give breaks, don't you?
Right.
And just 2.5 months before Miss Street died, you actually attended a clinic that discussed when breaks should be taken.
I can't remember, but I mean, I attended the clinics. So if that was one of them, then yeah.
Well, Coach, do you recall attending a clinic on June 15th of 2018?
I think that was around the date. I can't recall exactly.
Would seeing a copy of the PowerPoint that was shown that day help you remember?
Sure.
Go ahead and take a look at Exhibit 11. You have that in front of you, don't you?
Let me look. Okay.
Okay, now taking a look at Exhibit 11, this looks familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That first slide there, that's the slide from the PowerPoint presentation, the clinic you attended, right?
Yes.
And this is a fair and accurate copy, the pages of Exhibit 11 of the PowerPoint you reviewed that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we move Exhibit 11 into evidence.
At this time, we would object to hearsay, Your Honor, as well as substantially more prejudicial than probative. I may be heard on those grounds.
Okay.
We don't believe that there is any hearsay exception that would recognize this document that would suffice for Rule 803. Furthermore, Your Honor, the testimony in this document was created by some other agency. We don't know where that information came from. We don't know the reliability of that information. We don't know if that's the standard, if it's not the standard, or if they're recommendations or something they have to follow. Because we don't know any of that and opposing counsel hasn't brought anyone from that agency to testify today, hearing that will be substantially more prejudicial than it's probative because we don't know what weight to give that, Your Honor.
May I respond?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Your Honor, this witness just testified a moment ago that he attends clinics around the country to understand the best practices. And with regard to the hearsay in this case, opposing counsel is correct that we're not looking at 803 for exceptions. We're actually looking at 801 here. I'm not using this for the truth of the matter asserted by the statements contained therein. Instead, I'm going to confront the coach over the fact that he saw these statements, was put on notice about these practices, whether they were rules or recommendations or anything else, and then contrast that with what he did on September 7th, 2018. With regard to the substantially more prejudicial than probative aspect, because Your Honor is the fact finder in this case, we're confident that you'll be able to weed out any prejudice that might exist, but we don't believe that there is any. This witness admitted that some of the things he reviews are designed to help him know the best practices, and being confronted with these practices is not a violation of hearsay or 403.
So do you both agree that he has seen this PowerPoint before?
Your Honor, we
Yes,
agree that
I believe.
we agree that he's seen the PowerPoint. We don't believe that this meets any hearsay exception, Your Honor. And furthermore, if I may proffer,
Briefly.
the testimony says that under these conditions, this must happen. Opposing counsel is certainly using this for the truth of the matter asserted to get up there in closing arguments and argue that because he didn't give this amount of breaks at this time, that he's somehow negligent and didn't follow the standard of care.
Okay, so I'm going to overrule the objection to the extent that he's not offering it for the truth of the matter asserted. Should he come forth at any time and say these are the practices that must be followed, you can re-urge an objection to that at that time.
Yes, Your Honor.
But I'll overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Now that this is admitted, may I publish it?
Yes.
Now, Coach, I'd like you to take a look at the date that's on that first slide there. That says June 15th, doesn't it?
Yes.
And that was just 2.5 months before Ms. Street passed away, correct?
Yes.
Now, let's take a look at that second page there.
Okay.
That's titled Practicing in the Heat, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, as a health teacher and a coach of 20 plus years, you know that it's dangerous to practice in extreme heat.
Yes.
And when you viewed this PowerPoint, at the very least, it's safe to say that this confirmed what you already believed.
I feel like that's a little misleading. So these seminars and these clinics provide the recommendations that they think are best practice, right? Now,
Coach, that wasn't what I asked. What I asked was,
Opposing counsel allow my witness to finish his answer before asking the next question.
Your Honor, if I may respond briefly.
You let him, he can go on a little farther. If he seems to be completely going off on a tangent, you can redirect him back.
Your Honor, if I may, it's my opinion that the witness has gone on a tangent. I asked if this slide confirmed what he already believed, which is that practicing in the heat is dangerous. A moment ago, he said practicing in the heat is dangerous. I'm just asking if this is an accurate reflection of his opinion as well.
Your Honor, he's saying that he thinks that's misleading and trying to explain why he thinks that's misleading for Your Honor.
He can finish his answer.
Yes, Your Honor.
so like I was saying, like these are things that are recommended for coaches, but I mean, think about it. If I was to follow this stuff to the T exactly how it says, would I have 5 out of the 6 championships of last year? Probably not. Right? Like I understand, like you said, I'm a health teacher. Give me credit for understanding what my players can handle, right? I've been with these kids for about 3 to 4 years now. I know them, right? So I know what they're capable of. And like I said, I don't push them past their limits because again, if you have an injured player, a player that's not performing at their peak, it doesn't help the team. Our goal is to win as a team, right? So yeah, this can say whatever it says, but at the end of the day, this isn't gospel.
So, Coach, back to my question, then you would agree that practicing in the heat is dangerous?
It can be. I mean, put them out there in 130-degree weather. Of course, it's going to be dangerous.
Okay, then let's talk about what the recommendation was from the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association. Now, this recommendation, at the very least, recommended that when temperatures reach 96 to 99 degrees, players take a break every 30 minutes.
That's what it says on the slide.
And on the slide there, it also says that if they're practicing in temperatures above 100 degrees, the recommendation is to take a break every 15 minutes.
That's what it says on the slide.
Thank you. Ms. Zhao, you can take that slide down now. Now, Coach, on the day in question, while you knew it was hot, you never bothered to check what temperature it was.
I don't recall.
You don't recall whether or not you checked?
In that specific moment during practice, no. If I'm out there on the field scrimmaging, I'm not going to be like, okay, let's see what the weather's like right now.
So you don't bother checking what the weather is like when you're having these practices?
No, I'm not practicing as I'm coaching. I mean, I'm not consistently checking the weather as I'm practicing.
And Coach, I want to make sure that I got a statement right that you said just a moment ago. You have 5 out of 6 championship wins, don't you?
I believe so. That's what I recall.
And you said that if you followed those guidelines, you wouldn't have those same wins.
I don't believe I would, no.
Okay, now let's focus on the way you treated Miss Street on the day that she died.
Okay.
You were frustrated with her that day, weren't you?
Yes,
You thought she was goofing off.
I did think that.
On direct examination, you thought it seemed like she wasn't performing the way I know she can.
Yes,
You also thought she was being lazy.
yes.
These things, they all upset you, didn't they, Coach?
I mean, when your star player is lollygagging and the entire team is watching them, it kind of lets them do that too, right? And it goes back to the whole discipline thing about the team.
So that's a yes to my question, that when she doesn't listen, that upsets you.
Sure. No coach likes it when their player doesn't listen to them.
Okay, now let's talk about what you do when a player doesn't listen.
Okay.
You discipline those players, don't you?
Right.
And on that day in question, you disciplined Miss Street.
Yep.
You sent her to run Burma Road.
I did.
And you wanted to discipline her in front of the team because you can't win games without a disciplined and focused set of players, can you?
I don't know if my mentality was, oh, I need to make sure I do this in front of the team. We were during a practice. We were during a scrimmage. I saw her lollygagging. I had to go do Burma Road.
Well, as you said just a moment ago, you didn't want other people lollygagging, right?
Yeah, on the team, you don't, I mean, yes, that's correct. That makes sense, right?
So you didn't want her lollygagging so that the rest of the team wouldn't lollygag either. And that's why you disciplined her, wasn't it?
Okay, that and when a player themselves are not playing at the level that they normally should or could, then they also get disciplined. So it's not just for the purpose of the team to watch, but also for themselves.
Okay, so you disciplined for multiple different reasons.
Yes.
You made her run sprints as discipline that day, didn't you?
Yes.
She had to go to Burma Road.
Yes. So did
And
her friend.
going to Burma Road, that's sort of the name for running a drill.
Yes.
It means you sprint 30 yards, doesn't it?
Yes.
And then you follow that up by running with a ball or dribbling for another 30 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get down, excuse me, I'm sorry, for the record, is that a yes? And then you get down on your hands and your feet after those 60 yards and you bear crawl back.
Bear crawl back. Yep.
So that means that she was doing this on that day, as you mentioned, with no shade around.
Right.
On a particularly hot day, right?
Right.
And you didn't give Miss Street a 5-minute break when you pulled her over to the side to run Burma Road, did you?
If she needed a break, she could have just asked at that point. If she was tired or something, if she needed water.
Coach, I'm not asking what she did or didn't ask you to do. I'm saying as the coach, the person in charge of this team,
Yeah.
you didn't tell her to take a break.
No, I didn't say go take a break.
You didn't tell her go get some water.
No, I didn't.
And after she had run the Burma Road drill, that still really wasn't working for you, was it?
Working for me? No, she just wasn't performing.
Now, you sent her back onto the main field so you could do a new drill.
Not new, but yeah, it's a drill.
Well, Coach, you mentioned that you'd done slide tackles before, but just so we have this right, this was the first time you had ever done this drill.
Yeah.
This was an experiment, excuse me, this was a new drill you specifically chose because it had a lot of physical contact.
Because it had contact?
Yes, sir, because it had contact.
I don't think my intention was to make sure that this person comes into contact with other players and get hit.
Is it your testimony today that you did not specifically choose this drill because it had physical contact?
I mean, it's a form of discipline, right? It's another drill.
Sir, yes or no? It is your testimony today that you
drill.
chose this drill to have physical contact.
I mean, it's a drill that people do and there is contact in it. So if I were to say no, then I mean, that wouldn't make any sense because the drill has contact in it.
So is that a yes to my question that you specifically chose this drill because it had physical contact? I can show you a copy of your deposition if you need, Mr. Taylor. Excuse me, I didn't hear you there.
Yes, there was contact in the drill and that's why.
Okay, now, so you made this teenage girl stand in the middle of the field and her teammates lined up across from her.
Right.
There were 15 or so people there.
Sure.
And then one by one, you ordered each of those people to try and take the ball from her.
Right.
And you instructed that they use what's called a slide tackle.
Correct.
So they all went down the line, right? One after another after another.
In line, yeah.
And that happened for all 15 of those players lined up there.
They're about 15, yeah.
And every few times that someone would run up and try and steal that ball, they would make physical contact and Miss Street would fall to the ground, wouldn't she?
So the concept of a slide tackle is trying to steal the ball. It's not necessary that every time there will be contact to where they will fall and get hit.
But let me clarify my question. She did fall when she got hit.
She did fall when she got hit.
Several times, in fact.
Yeah.
Now, at no point during that drill did you tell her specifically to go take a break?
No. I didn't tell anybody to take a break.
At no point during that drill did you tell her to have some water?
I didn't tell anybody to go get water and all that. If they needed it, they could have just asked. It's there.
Like you said on direct examination, you didn't notice that she seemed to be struggling more than any other player there.
No.
But Coach, you do believe that Miss Street was acting a bit differently that day, don't you?
She wasn't listening.
More specifically, Coach, you think she was slow and she was missing shots, right?
Well, she also has a problem with like authority figures sometimes. So sometimes if she doesn't listen, that's on her, right?
That wasn't my question, sir. My question was that you noticed she was slow and she was missing shots that day.
She did miss shots that day and she wasn't performing as best as she could. Yeah.
Now, by the time the end of that slide tackle drill was nearing, you noticed that Miss Street was actually visibly struggling.
No.
It's your testimony today that you did not notice she was visibly struggling?
Like she was tired like everyone else. Like when you practice, normally everybody gets tired. So do you consider being tired struggling? Then yeah, sure.
Sir, I'm asking a clarification of your own words. You recall saying that at the time of the drill, she was visibly struggling, don't you?
Is it in my deposition? I mean, you're asking me exact word for word, and I can't remember exactly word for word right now.
Would you like me to show you to refresh your memory?
Sure.
Do you have a copy of it in front of you?
Yes.
Could you turn to page, let's see here. It's page 9 of your deposition. If you could start reading at line 13, and it's the first sentence of line 15. Go ahead and read that and look up at me when you're done.
Yes.
You're done?
Yeah, I'm done.
So you would agree with me that at that point she was struggling?
Well, sure, but at that point, let me be clear, she wasn't showing signs of struggling to the point of needing anything.
I understand you don't think she needed medical attention, but you would agree with me that at that time she was struggling.
Well, sure.
And at that point, you made her keep going with that drill, didn't you?
Yes.
Because, sir, in your own words, struggling and making her struggle That was sort of the point, wasn't it?
Man, you're making that sound really bad. It's for
That's my job, sir.
Yeah, I realize that.
Now,
It's for
in your own
disciplining and
words,
conditioning, yeah.
yes, so that's a yes, that struggling was the point.
You get better when you struggle. Practice makes, you practice. Yes.
That's a yes to my question?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, I have nothing further, and I pass the witness.
Okay, is there any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Now, Coach Taylor, do you value winning over your players' health?
No, absolutely not. That's ridiculous.
So when you say you wouldn't have won those 5 championships if you followed the guidelines, are you saying that you don't care about your students' health?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Are you saying that you don't follow best practices?
No,
Are you saying that you don't care about heat exhaustion or other dangers outside?
absolutely not. That's ridiculous.
Do you take these into consideration?
Absolutely.
When opposing counsel was asking if it was a particularly hot day, is it unusual for it to be over 100 degrees?
No, that's what I'm saying. This is 6 years, 5, 6 years. Like this happens every summer. This is a routine. It's the same place, Waco, Texas.
Thinking about the way you pushed your students on September 7th of 2018 in 105-degree weather, is it any
When I
different?
got there.
Is it any different from how you pushed your students in the previous years in the same weather?
No, absolutely not. It was the same every year.
And in the previous years in that weather, were you aware of any students using cocaine?
No, absolutely not.
Did you become aware of Rory using cocaine?
I did not until after.
Thank you. We have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. So Mr. Taylor, you may step down.
Your Honor, at this time, is it possible to get a quick time check?
Yes, that is what I'm adding up right now. Let's see. Plaintiff, you have 10 minutes, 45 seconds. Defense, you have 14 minutes, 15 seconds.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Okolo, I believe you're muted.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Your Honor, I just have a few portions I'd like to read from the expert witness testimony. Now, normally I would have my second chair put that on the screen for everyone's reference, but for time's sake, Your Honor, I'm just going to briefly read certain portions that I deem important for today's trial.
Okay.
Now, look, this has already been pre-admitted into evidence, Your Honor, starting with the report of Spencer London. Just one moment, Your Honor. Starting on page 2. According to the toxicology report, when Rory Street's blood was drawn and tested at approximately 1930 hours on September 8th, 2018, it tested positive for 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine. Cocaine can ultimately lead to cardiac arrhythmia, heart attacks, cerebral hemorrhage, or stroke, and heart failure. Additionally, cocaine can induce hypothermia, which lowers the threshold for heat stroke because it inhibits the body's natural cooling process. Going to this third page. Additionally, the autopsy report in this case indicates that Rory Street's heart showed signs of myocarditis, which is an inflammation or swelling of the heart muscle. Myocarditis can affect the heart muscle and the heart's electrical system, reducing the heart's ability to pump and causing rapid or abnormal heart rhythms, also known as arrhythmias. Myocarditis is one of the physical symptoms associated with cocaine use, which means this finding is also consistent with cocaine use. It is true that the amount of cocaine in Rory Street's system was nominal. However, Rory Street's blood was drawn long after her death and potentially even longer after Rory actually ingested the cocaine. Therefore, the test may not represent the actual amount of cocaine that was in Rory's blood at the time of the incident or earlier that day. And it's possible that the amount of cocaine in the system was actually much higher throughout the course of that day leading up to practice. Based on the foregoing, it is my opinion, with a reasonable degree of medical probability, that Rory Street's death was caused, at least in part, by the use of cocaine. And with that, Your Honor, we have no further testimony from the defense. The defense rests our case in chief.
Okay. Are we ready for closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor. May I have briefly maybe 30 seconds to just get some water?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm ready to proceed if the court is ready, Your Honor.
Yes.
She didn't stand a chance. Rory Street, this 18-year-old girl, so full of life, with her entire career ahead of her, she didn't stand a chance. Not in 105-degree weather, with the defendant barking orders, screaming at her, and forcing her to her ragged edge. After almost 2 hours of strenuous soccer practice in 100+ degree heat, the defendant, he changed his role from soccer coach to drill sergeant. He turned that soccer field into his battlefield. He no longer wanted to help Rory Street become a better soccer player. He just wanted to discipline her. Those are the defendant's words, not mine. You heard him testify today, and he was forced to admit that he wanted to discipline her because in this defendant's view, you can't have a winning team if everyone starts goofing off. When treating Rory Street like an animal on September 7th of 2018, making her do a bear crawl on Burma Road didn't satisfy the defendant, didn't live up to the lofty expectations he'd set, he turned that discipline into punishment. By punishing Rory Street and making her do that brand new drill, this man who'd been coaching for 20 years had never done before. He made Rory's teammates and friends line up in a row like a shooting gallery, and one by one ordered them to attack her legs to try and steal the ball away. Now, time after time, the coach admitted that she was knocked to the ground until she couldn't get up again. That girl died because the defendant wanted to win at all costs. But winning at all costs, it can't justify that kind of behavior, Your Honor. It can't justify negligence. It can't justify punishing a teenage soccer player by pushing her again and again and again until she collapses again and again and again. Winning at all costs has a limit to how expensive that cost can be. And Rory Street's life is just too high a price. The defendant's actions and conduct, that's what killed her. We've proven that today. Now, as Your Honor is aware, there are two questions that you have to answer today. The first question defines negligence. The first question defines negligence and the things that we had to prove, specifically with guidance regarding negligence. Now, we had to show you today that the defendant failed to use ordinary care and that the defendant's conduct was the proximate cause of Ms. Street's death. That means both that but for the defendant's actions, this harm wouldn't have occurred, but it also means that we have to show the harm to Rory was foreseeable to the defendant. And the elements are abundantly clear when we revisit the 3 points that I told you about at the beginning of today's trial. First, that Rory Street trusted the defendant as a coach. Second, that the coach broke the rules and broke that trust. And third, the defendant's actions cost Ms. Street her life. Now, Rory Street and her mother, they trusted the defendant. That's our first point. They trusted him as a coach. And frankly, they had no reason not to. The defendant got a college degree in physical education. He's been coaching for more than 20 seasons of soccer. He was a veteran on any field. He knew sports backwards and forwards. He taught health. He understood the physical dangers present to his players, and he went through additional trainings to make sure that everything he was doing would be the best practice. He was the one who was supposed to protect Rory Street, not punish her. Now, today, you heard the defendant try to point the finger at Ms. Street. On cross-examination, he said several times, she never asked me for a break, never asked me for water. The defense today wants you to ignore the behavior of this grown man who's been teaching health and coaching soccer for almost as long as I've been alive. and instead point the finger at Rory Street, an 18-year-old girl, blaming her for her own death, for asking to take a break, for not asking to take a break, for not saying that she was too hot when he was pushing her to her ragged edge on a scorching day. Frankly, Your Honor, how dare they? How dare the defense get up and blame this girl for what happened to her? It's not the responsibility of a young girl to tell her coach what she needs as he's coaching her. Now, the defendant in this case can deny all he wants, whether these were rules or best practices or guidelines. But the fact of the matter is this: when it was 100-degree heat and he was making her bear crawl up and down the field, when it was 100-degree heat and he forced her to do a drill that landed her on the floor again and again and again, he didn't give her a break. He didn't give her water. And that's what brings us to our second point today, that the defendant broke the rules and broke that trust. Now, how do we know that the defendant didn't follow those guidelines or best practices or whatever he'd like to call them? Because they said that when the heat was that high, players should take a break every 15 minutes. That on days when it was 96 to 99 degrees, maybe that break, it comes every 30 minutes. But all in all, this presentation put him on notice that there were better things he could be doing, things that he could take notice of other coaches doing, giving his players breaks and a reprieve. Now, did the defendant do these things? No, not based on the evidence today. He didn't give Rory a break because she didn't ask for one. But Your Honor, the guidelines that he reviewed 2.5 months before her death, they didn't say, oh, your players have to ask you to take a break. They said, these guidelines must have a break. And even if those aren't rules that he wanted to follow, they were things he was aware that other coaches were doing and that he could do at any time. The defendant intentionally ignored those notes. He intentionally chose to practice in that dead heat because, as he said when cross-examined, he thought that practicing in the heat toughened them up, thought it conditioned them better. He didn't think that if he followed those rules, he would have 5 of the 6 championship titles that he has. The defendant has intentionally ignored the heat on the day that Miss Street died, but Your Honor, you don't have to, because one of the exhibits that's been pre-admitted today is the NOAA weather report. And you can see that on the day present, that heat got higher and higher. No shade, no breaks, no relief. At 3:15, the temperature was over 100 degrees. And it keeps going up, roughly a degree an hour until it peaks at 105 degrees. With each drill that the defendant required Miss Street to do, that heat, it just gets worse and worse until eventually he decides to do a new drill and use her as a guinea pig. What does the defendant say to all this? Well, he says that Miss Street's cocaine in her system for who knows how long is what killed her. Look, we're not going to hide from the fact that she did have cocaine in her bloodstream that day. And we know that when you look at that, you might be tempted to think that that played a significant role in her death. But Your Honor, there's a report from a doctor in this case. The only expert witness who has a medical degree ruled that did not contribute to her death, stated that cocaine was not what caused her to die. Now, the defense's report that says it was, that comes from a toxicologist who didn't go to med school and does not have a medical degree. So when you weigh those two reports, really, Your Honor, you get to decide how much weight to give them. And you know that the weight of the plaintiff's report from an expert medical doctor who knows what he's talking about outweighs a list of symptoms written on a page. But besides, it doesn't matter what was in Miss Street's system. She could have been messed up on just about anything that day, and it wouldn't excuse or justify the behavior of the defendant. That's what brings us to our third and final point today, that it was the defendant's actions that cost Miss Street her life. Now, we heard from Aubrey Saracen. She had to endure seeing Rory Street take her last breath out on that soccer field. And she told you how Miss Street was acting before she died. She was struggling to breathe. She looked pale and almost lifeless.
You have 20 seconds.
Yes, Your Honor. But the defendant didn't give her a break. The cost of winning was too high. And we ask that you find the defendant liable for the death of Rory Street.
Closing arguments, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
May it please the court and opposing counsel. Rory Street died suddenly and without warning because she used cocaine before practice on September 7th, 2018. This powerful and illegal drug made it impossible for Rory to be able to cool her body down. You heard that it turned what would have been a normal routine soccer practice from years upon years into something that was a sudden and fatal tragedy. You've seen throughout the course of today's trial that the most heartbreaking thing of it all is that no one, not the athletic trainer, not Rory's best friend, not Coach Reese, knew what Rory had done before it was too late. Now, Your Honor, we live in a society where drug use and teens are just too hand in hand right now. There's plenty of teenagers out there using drugs and they're experiencing terrible, terrible side effects. Too often, teenagers believe that I'm young, I'm healthy, using it one time is not going to affect me. But science tells us otherwise. You've seen the expert report from Spencer London today. Even the slightest amount of cocaine, even one use can cause heart attacks, cardiac arrests, arrhythmias, myocarditis. It only takes a small amount to have a life-changing effect. Fatal consequences. We saw that's what happened on September 7th of 2018. Expert testimony tells us that the cause of Rory's death was heat exhaustion as a result of her cocaine usage. Now, opposing counsel got up here and he wanted you to take our experts and look at them side by side. He said, okay, I have an expert. That's a cardiologist. That's a doctor. Listen to him. He says cocaine didn't make a difference. Your Honor, we had a question about drug use. We understood that cocaine was an issue in today's case. We didn't call a cardiologist because that's not the cardiologist's specialty. We called a toxicologist, someone who is specialized and works with drugs day in and day out. That's their job. We called the expert in their field. You know, oftentimes as a lawyer, people hit me up all the time and say, hey, I need help with this legal problem. But you know, if I practice products liability, it's not that important I answer that IP question, that intellectual property question. Maybe I give it to an expert in intellectual property and have them analyze the situation. Your Honor, that's exactly what we did here. We saw that cocaine was a problem in this case, and so we asked the expert, we asked the toxicologist, do you think this made a difference? He looked at all the evidence and said, yes. The symptoms are shown, the symptoms of that cocaine usage, we can tell that caused Rory's body to be unable to cool down. And so in that routine soccer practice where normally no one would overheat, the one person on that field who did partake in drugs, that's the person who ended up dying, folks. And that's tough to deal with. We're not sitting here today trying to point the finger at Rory saying, Rory, it's your fault that you died. It's your mother's fault that you died. No, Your Honor, we're looking at the reality of the situation. We're here today to talk about whether or not Coach Taylor didn't do what a reasonable person would have done under the similar circumstances, Your Honor. Now, when we think about what Coach Taylor did, we got to put it into context. What a reasonable person would have done. For years, Coach Taylor has been running these drills, being that intense coach, pushing his students to various limits. No problem. We heard time and time again that this Burma road drill, this drill that opposing counsel wants you to believe is so exhausting, so tiring, it's been ran for decades. Rory's mother ran that back in the 90s. Coach Taylor told you he also ran that back in the 90s. He didn't come up with this drill. This isn't some new drill. It's a tradition. Hundreds of students have gone through this tradition and nothing has happened under similar weather conditions. Our opposing counsel keeps making a big deal of this idea that it was so hot outside. It was particularly hot. Folks, it was a Tuesday. It's hot all the time here in Waco, Your Honor. It going above 100 degrees, well, that's not unusual. You heard it from Aubrey. It's not unusual they practice in 100-degree weather. You know, Your Honor, it might sound good and look good, but that's just the reality. You know, opposing counsel showed you this chart. The chart showed the temperature rising as practice began. You take a very close look at that chart, Your Honor. The temperature rose in increments of only 5 degrees the entire time. It rose from 100 degrees to 105 degrees. Not unusual. It's not a significant rise in the temperature, Your Honor. And when you look at that whole entire weather report, Your Honor, you're gonna see it was over 100 degrees until 8 p.m. that night. From 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 8 p.m., 6 hours, it was over 100 degrees. Opposing counsel wanted Coach Taylor to practice in the evening, but what difference would it have made, Your Honor? It wouldn't have made any difference at all. There was nothing unreasonable, nothing unusual, nothing that Coach Taylor did that was so different. But then opposing counsel got up here and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Coach Taylor didn't follow the rules. What rules? No one presented you with something that Coach Taylor should have done or must have done. You saw that testimony, that exhibit 11, Your Honor, that PowerPoint. We discussed that PowerPoint wasn't coming in for the truth. It wasn't coming in to define the rules that Coach Taylor needed to follow. Those are guidelines. Coach Taylor expressed to you that he has been coaching for years, decades. Under the same weather conditions, he knows his students. He knows what they can and cannot handle. He told you he didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Now, he said, yes, I wouldn't win those 5 championships without those guidelines. But when I asked him deeper into that, when I asked him what he truly meant, he didn't say he was disregarding students' health. He didn't say their health didn't matter anymore. He said he was looking out for the students' best interest. He did what he had been doing for years, Your Honor. Nothing was unreasonable. The only difference that happened that day was Rory's use of cocaine. And we heard why that was, Your Honor. Rory had been struggling. Rory had always been that tough kid. We heard that Rory was able to play half a game with a broken nose. I mean, I couldn't even do that. This kid was the kid that was going to tough it out and not say anything about it. And we saw that's what happened. The athletic trainer, Rory, Aubrey, no one said anything to Coach Taylor to let Coach Taylor know there was some sort of health complications. Rory wasn't showing those signs. You heard Aubrey say it happened suddenly. It came out of nowhere. And Your Honor, I get it. Opposing counsel got up here and he said, how dare they? How dare they blame Rory for her own death? Your Honor, that's not what it's about. And, you know, to be honest, I understand opposing counsel's frustration. I understand Rory and Jordan Street's frustration. A parent has lost their child, and that's not easy to deal with by any means. I understand that you want to point the finger at someone that's innocent. Look, that's part of the grieving process. But that's not justice. Justice isn't pointing the finger at the innocent people. You know, hindsight is 20/20. When we look at that situation, When we talked about what specifically the individuals who were there and present on September 7th saw, no one told you that they saw anything that would let them know that Rory was having health complications that would lead to her death. No one saw her use that cocaine. No one was there necessarily when she was going through that struggle. Rory was trying to push herself, but she couldn't push herself enough. The problem is students push themselves beyond their limits so often. They don't understand their limits. They don't understand what their body could do. They're only 18. We get it. But we can't look at the coach and just say it's the coach's fault without looking to see what it is the coach knew. The coach didn't know Rory was struggling. The coach didn't know Rory was having chest pains. All of a sudden, Rory collapsed and started seizing, and the coach did not know. So when we look at what a reasonable person would have done, it's exactly what Coach Taylor did and had been doing year after year after year. Your Honor, this case is not about a coach and their coaching strategies, their ability to coach and their drills and what they run, Your Honor. No, it's about a kid who was struggling. A kid who didn't necessarily know how to properly cope with those struggles like any other teenager. It's about Rory Street, who used cocaine before that practice, and no one knew about it before it was too late. Can't blame Coach Taylor for doing what a reasonable person would have done. It's because Coach Taylor acted reasonably, because Coach Taylor could not have foreseen those injuries, because no one on that field could have foreseen those injuries, that I'm asking you to find Coach Taylor not responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So scoring judges right now, if you can just reply to the email from Robert with your ballots. We're all going to hang out in the room until I get the okay that all the ballots have been received, and then you will be free to go.